The Bacta War picks up shortly after the conclusion of the Krytos trap. Ysanne Isard has been installed by the Thyferra Corporation as the head of state of Thyferra, the planet that produces the life-saving Bacta, thereby placing her in complete control of the substance. Due to the New Republic's policy on not interfering with the leadership of independent worlds, any reprisal against Isard has been denied. In order to bring her to justice, Rogue Squadron has resigned from the New Republic and set out on what seems to be an impossible mission. But, as the saying goes, impossible is what Rogue Squadron does best. The opening chapters of the book are set up for the coming conflict. Isard has placed Flori Voru in charge of running the planet's Bacta monopoly and is preparing to deal with Rogue Squadron. She does not believe they can beat her, but she knows better than to completely doubt their ability to cause trouble. She also knows that the New Republic will eventually be forced to move against her, so efforts must be made to entrench herself on Thyferra. The Rogues, meanwhile, are trying to figure out how to wage war against someone who commands a small fleet with only a single X-Wing, belonging to Corran Horn. They begin their efforts by searching for overlooked weapons caches and discover a significant one with Gavin's Uncle Huff, father to rebellion hero Biggs Darklighter. Gavin goes to Tatooine to meet with him, accompanied by Corran Horn and his new girlfriend, smuggler Merrix Tarek. During this meeting, they find Huff meeting with another buyer for the weaponry, Booster Tarek, renowned smuggler, former rival of Corran's father Hal Horn and Merrix's father. After some discussion, they acquire the weaponry and Booster's assistance. Meanwhile, sympathetic elements within the New Republic have been slowly moving resources and information to the Rogues. Pash Kraken informs Wedge of a space station orbiting Yogdal that had been slated to be destroyed. Instead of destroying the station, Pash forged his records and allows the Rogues to use it as a base of operations. Separately, due to a mix-up with the ship allocations and filing of paperwork, the Rogues' X-Wings, which were officially New Republic property, were declared destroyed and disposed of, giving the Rogues a full complement of fighters. An anti-Isard movement is organized on the planet by mercenaries, Elsko, Loro, and Sixtus Quinn, which begins looking for ways to upset the Isard-Thyferra regime. Finally, a squadron of Twi'lek warriors friendly to Wedge join the efforts. The Rogues know that attacking Isard directly will result in epic failure, due to the fleet power she commands. However, attacking Bacta supply groups and stealing the Bacta will embarrass her and force her to spread her resources to cover the supply runs. If they're able to spread her forces out enough, they can concentrate their own forces and eliminate some of her ships. They begin carrying out their plans, pirating Bacta shipments and delivering to those who need them. Corran and Merrix go undercover into Thyferra to deliver supplies to the Resistance, and Corran is hurt by some stormtroopers who find him suspicious. After his recovery, he discovers Bror Jace, a former member of Rogue Squadron who was presumed to have been killed due to the action of the spy within their own ranks, is actually still alive and working with the Thyferran Resistance. Further, he learns that Bror and his entire family has been working with the Vratrix to approach the Republic, and it was Bror who suggested they approach Wedge. Bror returns with Corran and rejoins Rogue Squadron. As Rogue Squadron's efforts are successful, Isard grows angrier. In retaliation, she unveils a litany of countermeasures like forcing Bacta buyers to escort the shipments themselves, threatening the families of crew members that cooperate with the Rogues, and using her Star Destroyers to set traps. Separately, Booster Tarek offers Wedge a deal. He will run the Yogdal station as a trading outpost, which will give the Rogues cover and bring in money and resources for the Rogues to use. The Rogues and their allies continue to work to unseat Isard. Rogue Squadron captures multiple Bacta shipments and distributes them to needful communities or to Coruscant to continue treating Krytos, while the subversive movement continues undermining the Isard-Thyferra regime on Thyferra. This increased Bacta supply coming from Rogue Squadron attracts the attention of smuggler Talon Card. Booster negotiates a deal with Card where they will trade shipments of Bacta for necessary weapons to continue the fight against Isard. Unfortunately, there is a spy within Card's organization who is seeking higher pay. She reveals the location of one of the trades, the Alderaanian Graveyard, the field of planetary debris left over from the destruction of Alderaan. With this information, Isard procures an interdictor cruiser from High Admiral Pterodok and hatches a plan. The Rogues and their shipping vessels arrive in the Alderaanian system and begin the process of trading Bacta for weapons. An oddity occurs during the exchange. Tycho, an Alderaanian, begins receiving some odd transmitter data from further in the graveyard. Wedge, knowing that Tycho had adopted an Alderaanian threat designation system for his X-Wing, chalks it up to an odd interaction with some beacons from keepsakes left by other survivors. Suddenly, a Victory-class Star Destroyer, the Corruptor, appears in the system. The Rogues immediately scramble their transports and prepare to jump into hyperspace, normal operating procedure for their hit-and-run tactics. However, The arrival of the interdictor aggregator prevents them from fleeing. They must stay and fight. Wedge immediately begins calling out orders. The rogues in the Twi'lek squadron are split into 3 groups. The first group makes a run against the Corruptor, firing a barrage of proton torpedoes. This brings down the Star Destroyer's shields, with a few of the missiles actually hitting the ship. In standard Star Destroyer command tactics, Captain Ait Convarian ordered the ship rotated, thereby offering fresh shields to the attackers. The second group makes a similar run, bringing down the shields on the other side of the ship. Wedge realizes that a third run must be made quickly before the shields on the first side are brought back up, which would doom the rogues. However, at the last moment, a Thyferra-class war cruiser emerges from the graveyard and begins pouring turbolaser fire into the shieldless first side of the Corruptor. Escape pods begin pouring out of the Corruptor. The ship is, for all intents and purposes, dead and begins to list into the graveyard where it will be destroyed. The rogues turn their attention to the aggregator, which receives significant damage before fleeing the system. After performing a quick review of the new arrival, named Valiant, they determined the ship is a relic of the pre-disarmament Alderaan that had been slaved to a different ship, the Second Chance. When the Second Chance had been lost, the Valiant had returned to Alderaan to await any new orders. After picking up on Tycho's Alderaanian broadcast signal, it determined him to be a friendly ship and adopted his targeting data. With the day 1 and the shipment secured, the rogues leave the Alderaan system. Isard has lost one of her 4 Star Destroyers, albeit the smallest of the 4, and has been embarrassed even further. Booster and Merrick's confront Card over the leak in his organization and find that he already knows who the guilty party is. Further, he offers the woman's life to Booster. Booster has plans to use the woman's duplicity to his advantage and asks Card to locate a gravity well projector for the rogues to use. Saryanka, commander of one of Isard's remaining Imperial-class Star Destroyers, the Avarice, is beginning to have second thoughts about Isard's ability to lead effectively. Yanka is a principled and moral man who always used the Empire's legitimacy as justification for the questionable things he was ordered to do. With the Emperor's death, subsequent fracturing of the Empire, and Isard's continued diminishment in legitimacy and seeming sanity, he is finding it much harder to justify his orders. During a covert rendezvous with his mistress on El Chandru Paika, the rogues approach him with an offer he cannot refuse. Later, Isard receives a transmission from Yanka announcing that her insanity and ineffectual leadership has grown too great for him and his crew to remain in her service, and that they are leaving and fleeing to the Outer Rim. His abandonment leaves her only the Imperial-class Star Destroyer Virulence and the Super Star Destroyer Lusanki. In response, Isard puts into action a plan to systematically round up and exterminate a large segment of the Vratrix population in order to force Wedge to act against her. Once the word of this action reaches Wedge, he and Booster hatch a plan to bring about the end of the war. After putting everything into place, Booster allows the spy in Card's organization to learn of their base at Yagdul. Isard receives the information and announces her plan. She will send both of her ships to Yagdul to destroy the station there, leaving only the Thyferran Home Defense Corps to defend the planet, despite the objections of Lusankia's captain, Joke Drisso. Lusankia and the Virulence arrive at Yagdul. As they arrive, they find Rogue Squadron already in position to travel to Thyferra and watches as they jump to hyperspace. Drisso is unfazed by this, knowing he can destroy the station at Yagdul and return to Thyferra only a few minutes after the rogues arrive. Drisso orders the Virulence to remain in a holding position, wanting to claim the destruction of the base for himself and his ship. As he approaches the station, Booster orders him to surrender, a preposterous demand given the situation. The Lusankia moves closer to the station in order to destroy it, and finds that a gravity well has been installed on the station and activated against the ship. The gravity well is not strong enough to prevent the Lusankia from escaping like an interdictor cruiser, but it, paired with the gravity of the planet and its moons, limits the ship's maneuverability and speed. Suddenly, dozens of targeting systems lock onto the Lusankia. Drisso begins to panic, knowing that the number of proton torpedoes indicated by the number of targeting systems is enough to do serious damage to the Lusankia, if not completely neutralize it. At the last moment, the Virulence moves in between the Lusankia and the station, breaking the gravity hold and sacrificing itself. Drisso falls back and orders a jump back to Thyferra to destroy the rogues. The Lusankia arrives to find the situation vastly different than expected. The rogues are there attacking the THDC, but they are not alone. Also present is the Valiant, several freighters, and a Star Destroyer, the Avarice, now named Freedom. While Freedom maneuvers to pass over the top of Lusankia, enabling it to fire down on the top of the ship, and Valiant works the underside of the ship, Rogue Squadron breaks into 3 groups. The first group, led by Wedge, makes a pass at Lusankia and fires a salvo of torpedoes. To Drisso's shock, the number of torpedoes detected on radar is far higher than the X-Wings could fire. The majority of the torpedoes bring down the shields, with the remainder striking the ship. After some deduction, Drisso realizes what the rogues have done. They have retrofitted the freighters with torpedo launchers and slaved their firing systems to the rogues, which allows them to increase their firing capabilities exponentially. Since the freighters themselves have no targeting systems, Lusancia is not able to designate them as enemies automatically and, as such, cannot target them. The second group makes their run, doing significant damage to the Super Star Destroyer. At the same time, Ayala and the other guerrilla forces on Thyferra started Vratrix's revolt to overthrow Isard and the Thyferra Corporation. The battle continues for some time. The rogues have exhausted their proton torpedoes and done considerable damage to the Lusancia, but the ship is still active and dangerous. The Lusancia has directed the majority of its fire at the Freedom, demolishing the Star Destroyer's guns on one side and rendering it operational for a while. The crew is able to return power to the ship, and Ysanne is left with only two options: limp away from the battle and live in fear of Isard's retaliation, or swing the ship around and lay into Lusancia with the guns on the other side. Knowing a life on the run is no life at all, Ysanne elects to continue fighting. Despite this, however, it appears that the battle is over, and the Lusancia has weathered the storm. Suddenly, a Star Destroyer appears in system. It is the Virulence. Drisso and the crew of the Lusancia begin to celebrate. Isard has won the Bacta War. Or so it seems. Suddenly, the Virulence unloads its fighter complement, including 3 squadrons of A-Wings. Wedge contacts the Virulence and realizes Booster Tarek is in command. As it turns out, once the Lusancia fell for the bluff of the multiple targeting systems at Yagdal and fled the system, Booster was left to deal with a Star Destroyer with very little weaponry. As luck would have it, Pash Kraken's A-Wing squadron was traveling to Yagdal and were ripped out of hyperspace by the gravity well. The commander of Virulence assumed the entire thing was a New Republic ambush and surrendered the ship. With the addition of a fresh Star Destroyer, the battle quickly goes against Isard, who has actually abandoned the planet in a shuttle and is quickly making for hyperspace. Corrin and his fighter group take chase after Isard and are intercepted by Iracy. She and Corrin fly against each other in a dogfight before Corrin emerges victorious, killing the rogue spy. Corrin continues his pursuit of Isard, but it is Tycho who gets the kill, ending Isard's threat. In space, the Lusancia is defeated, but Drisso, now self-promoted to Grand Admiral, refuses to surrender. He announces his intention to ram the Super Star Destroyer into Thyferra, before being murdered by his crew. The crew surrenders, thereby ending the Bacta War. Rogue Squadron has once again pulled off the impossible. As the story winds down, the rogues are informed that their resignation paperwork was somehow misfiled and lost, so the entire operation is retroactively declared to be a New Republic operation. Thyferra joins the New Republic, and Wedge uses his temporary station as captain of a ship to marry Corrin and Merrick's. In the final moments, Talon Karrde helps negotiate a standoff between Booster and Aaron Kraken over the ownership and fate of the Virulence. With Karrde's help, a deal is brokered. Booster will keep Virulence and turn over the majority of its weaponry. The Bacta War is a great book, bringing to a close the first initial arc of the X-Wing series and depicting the defeat of the first Imperial Warlord. When we return, the focus of the series will turn to the creation of a new squadron and will feature the hunt for Warlord Zinj. If you haven't read the Bacta War, I would highly recommend it. If you have, let me know what you think about it. Thank you for watching.